Hello, everyone. My name is Derek DeWinter, and welcome to our listeners who are tuning into the DeWinter Difference, an audio podcast where I spend a bit of time with incredible executives I've known for years, and you get to listen in. I hope that our conversations are unique, fun, insightful, short enough to keep your attention, but long enough to listen on the way from point A to point B. Our goal is to have fun, sharing a few takeaways that you can apply in your own career, life, and relationships. Today, you get to listen into a conversation between yours truly and Dara Bazzano, SVP and CAO of T-Mobile. As if being the chief accounting officer of an $80 billion company with a $200 billion market cap wasn't enough, Dara is also on the board of Lulu's, Self Financial, and Girls on the Run. Dara, I really appreciate you tolerating me these last dozen or so years and joining us today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for the invite. I appreciate it. It's great to catch up with you.
Excellent. So for our listeners, can you share a little bit about your career progression as a baseline and a couple of professional or personal drivers that led you ultimately to where you are at T-Mobile? Essentially, a quick scroll through your LinkedIn profile.
So it's a great question. Actually, I would say I'll start with the drivers. The driver and drivers, I should say, in my professional career has been 100% my family and my family situation. So I was married young and had two kids and went through a divorce at 27. And I would say that that really sort of outlined or framed up how it is that I approached my career. I found actually public accounting, surprisingly enough, to be very accommodating for me and providing me the flexibility that I needed to raise my kids as a single parent. Although I will say that I had worked really hard with my ex-husband to co-parent. And what our divorce allowed for me, which is going to sound very strange, but it allowed me, between the divorce and public accounting, when my kids were with their father, it was really easy for me to just work a lot and do what it is that I needed to do to be successful in public accounting, which, as anybody knows, there's a lot of hours. Those are 60, 70-hour weeks fairly consistently, especially early in your career. And when the kids were with me, though, it allowed me a little bit of flexibility, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s. You started to get a little bit more flexibility to be able to work from home, schedule, plan your schedule or your commutes and meetings with clients and all of that around the kids' schedule and such. And I would choose clients that allowed me the flexibility to, like, for instance, I had big global clients where I had teams that were in Asia or Europe. Well, at those work hours, I could work from home because it was early in the morning or really late in the evening. And so I chose a lot of the clients that I chose to work, as well as just my career or profession within public accounting. And I guess I should state that I worked both at KPMG as well as PwC. And once the kids were old enough and went off to college, that's when it is that I decided to leave public accounting and join the Gap and just go out to the private / public sector. And that was a big change for me. And I have to say, actually, as much as I loved my public accounting or my career, my time in public accounting, I did make partner, which was a fantastic personal goal for me and professional goal for me. So when I left public accounting and went to work at the Gap, I have to say that there was something that just like a light switch that flipped for me. I absolutely loved really being an operator within an organization. So when I left as a partner at Pricewaterhouse, I joined the Gap as their controller, and then was promoted to, and that was a global controller role. So I had teams all over the world, as well as, I guess, within a pretty short couple of years, was made CAO, which is far more operational, beyond just your typical finance or controllership role, which was a lot of fun. And I loved it. It's just made, the sort of the second chapter of my career so much more fun, and something that I really looked forward to, as well as the Gap is just, an incredible place to work. And then from there, I had been recruited or headhunted away to an organization called CBRE, which was a global, it's actually the largest global asset management company, real estate asset management company in the world. And I had a team of about 5,000 people across the country or across the globe, and spent quite a bit of time traveling and, taking care of my teams globally. And then had an opportunity to join T-Mobile that was looking to do a lot more finance transformation work, which is the type of work that I really started to do more when I was at CBRE. And I thought it would just be a really great opportunity to stay a little bit more local, as well as the CBRE job was going to require me to move to Texas. And I really didn't want to move to Texas. My whole family is here on the West Coast. And so I'm able to fly from Santa Rosa, which is one of my homes, or at the time was my home before I joined T-Mobile, and fly directly into, Seattle. So my husband and I moved to Seattle, and it's been a great 4 years at T-Mobile. Fantastic work with the Sprint and T-Mobile integration. And now we're working on a large ERP sort of target operating model transformation as well that we kicked off about 3 years ago. So been really challenging, a lot of fun, great to be on the other side of public accounting, and will probably be my last corporate stop before I retire and officially move on to board roles, more, full-time, part-time in a retired capacity.
That's awesome. I need to clarify one thing that you said. You had 5,000 people on your team at CBRE?
5,000 people. I did.
And so
Yes.
what's this current scale at T-Mobile?
So T-Mobile, very different because T-Mobile is just predominantly domestic. I mean, our entire finance organization isn't 5,000 people here at T-Mobile. I think we've got maybe 1,800 people, and that's partly some procurement supply chain folks in there as well. And then my organization, when I joined, my org was about 600 people. I picked up an IT organization, kicked it up to 700 people. We've been working through a target operating model change, like I mentioned before, and have actually set up a shared service center out in Overland Park, which is where Sprint's corporate headquarters had been located. And so I've actually shifted a portion of my team to report into the leadership there at the Shared Service Center. So my team now is about 300, probably 350 folks as we work through the operating model change. So it's still a fairly large organization. I do have quite a bit of finance IT specialist. So it's a little bit different than your typical chief accounting officer, as people think of chief accounting officer roles, I think.
You throw around these numbers relatively casually, like 5,000 people is larger than many towns that people grew up in. 3 or 4 or 600 people are significantly larger than many companies that people work at
True.
from top to bottom. So it's really interesting. And sort of on that note, the bulk of your career has been in larger organizations, and public accounting notwithstanding, really, I kind of characterize larger corporate organizations like Gap or CBRE or T-Mobile. Have you had a knack for managing large team, or is that a muscle that you have had to work on over the years? And if so, what are the types of things that you did, or what would you encourage people to focus on to build that professional muscle?
Such a wonderful, thoughtful question. It's probably all of the above. Within public accounting, like I'd mentioned, I did have teams that I worked with across the globe. And again, growing up in public accounting, you're very much focused on your entire team. You're part of a broader organization, but that teaming mentality is so strong and is something that I really thrived in. I really loved being a part of the team and ensuring that the team dynamics was high functioning. So that was something that I probably developed more in public accounting than when I went out into the private sector. Far more, I guess I'm just wired that way. So one, I've been blessed to, no matter where I was working, I had just phenomenally talented teams. that I acquired and was hired into. So very thankful for that. So I think my muscle or my maybe secret power is going into an organization, quickly trying to assess the team dynamics as well as just the political energy and culture within an organization, and trying to figure out how do we set team members up for success? What are certain individuals' strengths and what are the weaknesses? And really honing in on where it is that people were really strong and making sure that as a complete team, we had a really high functioning team. And that requires an incredible amount of diverse thought, experience, training, background, different working styles and all of that. So, if I had any sort of toxic, fixed mindset people, I would tend to find better or different roles for them if their approach was not working for what it is that we as a team or as an enterprise needed. And then just ensure that we really brought in, strong, capable people to help accentuate the existing teams. I would say a lot of my success is very much based on just the incredibly talented people that I have been able and been fortunate to work with over the years.
You're probably not giving yourself near enough credit, but we'll leave it at that for sure. So,
Thank you.
I have been doing what I do for a long, long time, and which means I've met hundreds and thousands of people over the years, and it would be untrue to say that I remember everybody very well and remember all the different places where I would have run into people. But I do remember meeting you for the first time. So that really sticks out as, one of the highlights of my professional career. Do you recall where that was?
Well, I believe, was it a restaurant there on the Embarcadero in San Francisco? I think, was it Perry's? Was
Well
that the restaurant?
done. Very
Okay,
well done.
excellent. There. Well, we
We
had a blast. We laughed so hard. We had a great time. It was a fun.
It was a very good meeting, and it's actually kind of fun to meet people at places, which Zoom doesn't allow, obviously, so much because I find that it kind of earmarks, whether the
True.
smells of the sun or the location or the chairs or whatever. It really helps to kind of galvanize where you meet folks. But it's sort of slightly beside the point, other than it was a very memorable meeting for me. And I recall very specifically thinking to myself, and this goes back 12, 13, 14 years ago, that I haven't met a lot of people like you. And why I say that is it was kind of near the time in the marketplace where a VP controller role was being elevated to chief accounting officer in the market. And there weren't a ton of chief accounting officers, particularly in the Bay Area, I guess I would say. And because there weren't a lot of you in the Bay Area, I remember being terribly impressed. And I won't ask you what you thought of me, but you've been through this evolution of controller to CAO. And I guess I'd like for you to kind of comment on your view of the importance of that within the CFO's organizational structure.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you. That is very kind of you. And I too remember our meeting because, like I mentioned, I just remember we had a great time and there was lots of laughter. And obviously, we've stayed connected this, last decade and a half. So, what's interesting, and I sort of touched on it earlier, I do think as you know, the business world changes, industries change, roles within organizations change. I left public accounting, went into your typical global controller role, quickly found the, I guess, the level of change within our environment, especially from an IT perspective, and as well as our supply chain perspective, sort of a lot of your back office functions operationally, how things get done, how quickly things get done, the immense amount or need of transformation sort of in that back office function to really meet the current day, pressures of whether it was like at the gap, moving from predominantly retail footprint to a more of an online presence to compete with all of the online retailers. I found the sort of the frenetic pace at which we had to transform back office to be incredibly compelling and exciting. And I love digging into that and working with my supply chain folks and my IT folks and understanding how that impacted our systems and processes and such. And so I found for myself, I am very focused on people and process and technologies to drive efficiencies and improvements. And that's where, I guess, like I said, sort of a light switch flipped for me. And I just really dug in and got engaged on things more operationally. And that's where I think CAOs today can really make a big difference. And actually, that's how it is. I got the CAO title. There was a new CFO that came on board at the Gap, and she said, "You really are operating far more at this operational CAO level. Here's a promotion." Which again, then was a great segue over into the CAO of CBRE, where, as you mentioned, 5,000 people, it's a lot of people. I actually had all of the regional CFOs reporting in to me, and then I reported into the global CFO. So in that role, I was deeply embedded in the finance aspects, the accounting aspects, but more importantly, really the operational aspects of sort of the back office comings and goings. And I think that most CAOs at this point are probably more focused on that to support the CFO. So as much as I'm engaged with, a lot of the investor relations piece and working with legal, working with all your business developers for merger acquisitions and such, you've got the technical aspects of how to account for things, but it's also really understanding, the I guess the way to think about it is the SOX control premise, Sarbanes-Oxley, really forced accountants to think more, process and engineering mindset, with IT thrown over the top when IT is changing, rapidly. And so you just have to think, differently and think along the lines as your IT brothers and sisters, and work with them to ensure that you are addressing any of the risks that this, IT transformation introduces into your financial reporting environment. And how do you mitigate that risk? And how do you ensure that you've got, the right folks focused on the right things? It's just changed a lot.
Peeling some of that back, probably some sage advice to existing controllers out there is there's only so much muscle you can build in your accounting chops, that if you want to be elevated within an organization to a CAO or other, then that, being more involved in that intersectionality between IT and supply chain and transformation and the other parts of the business is how you climb to the next level, as opposed to just being a brilliant expert around SEC issues or the like.
Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, thank you very much. So you and I are both no longer in our 20s and with a little bit more experience in life. I wonder what type of lessons you've learned along the way trying to manage your professional work health and your personal health. I know this is, an area of importance to you, and I'm sure you look at things very differently today versus yesterday. And I guess I'd love to get some perspective and some insight that you can share about being healthy in a demanding corporate environment, and things that you think about and things that you try to do both physically and mentally.
Yes, such a great question, and super important for all of us corporate athletes, as I like to put it. If I were to, let me kind of phrase it this way, if I were to give any advice to my 20, 30-year-old self, I would say carve out time for sleep. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but sleep is so important to every aspect of your day and your mental and physical well-being. And sleep is something that I started to really focus on probably about a decade ago. And my guess is it was driven by all of the global travel that I was doing and the fact that I was working really odd hours, early mornings, late evenings, dealing with global teams and such. And I just was hitting burnout very quickly. And I kept thinking, I love my job. I love my team. I love my work, but I am still just constantly burnt out. And, as I hit my 30s and 40s, I just didn't have the same level of energy that I did when I was younger. And I was trying to understand, what is it that I could be doing differently? So about a decade ago, really started getting into this trend that probably some of your listeners know, but it's called biohacking. And that is really where you just start taking more control of your environment around you to really help strengthen and sort of manage your physical and mental well being better. And sleep was the first thing that I attacked. And it was incredibly important. And frankly, and I'll throw this out there, recognizing this may make some people uncomfortable, but as I, approached menopause and went through menopause, I was really amazed at what a difference if my sleep was under control, if my, hormone balance was under control, if my physical, I kept up with all the physical exercise and resistance training and all of that. I just feel so much better and I can tackle and handle anything and everything that life is throwing at me. And certainly a lot of my travel and somewhat frenetic hours at times was much more easy to manage. But I do really think that that's something that we lose track of, especially when we're younger. And so my advice to many folks out there is really getting a handle, do some research on what, sleep actually does for your body. I would say at this point, I am not a big drinker anymore. I recognized how much alcohol disrupted my sleep and just how much that would completely, ruin the next day or the next couple of days for me. And so I really had to, as I got a little bit older, went through menopause, I really started to hone in on what is it that I need to be more optimized as a human being, to really show up for myself and my coworkers, obviously my family and my husband. So that's something that is just a whole new chapter for me, and something that I focus on quite a bit and actually help others that are going through menopause, or even men that I work with that are just trying to get a handle on their health for fun, sort of like a side passion,
Uh-huh.
health and
Do
nutrition.
you, are you pretty vocal about this internally at T-Mobile?
You know, am I vote? Yeah, probably. I probably am. It's a matter of trying to balance not passing judgment on how people live their lives, because you never want to do that
Hmm.
and turn people off. But I do have people that will ask, hey, you look great, or you've got a ton of energy, or I don't know how you manage everything that you manage, and things like that. I did for Christmas give, all of my direct reports Peter Attia's Outlive book, because he's somebody that I think just has a real practical, pragmatic approach to, how to monitor and maintain, a healthy lifestyle. So yeah, people are pretty clear. I don't, people are drinking, I don't drink. So people
Hmm.
ask me questions around that, and I'll explain sort of the my health journey and path that I'm on. So, but it's
Yeah,
really been life changing for me.
I asked that question because I think it's much easier to be a vocal SVP talking about this stuff and making sure that people take you seriously, that it's a really important part of life, and how it leads to a better work product as well. It might be a lot more difficult if you're 28 and busy saying yes to meetings and yes to this and yes to that all the time. And I I don't know that I have, and this isn't, it's more of a statement than a question. Like I throw it out there, like that would be a challenging thing to navigate if it was something very important to you and work was potentially part of the way that that was being compromised.
So it's a really important conversation. And that's where I think people have to be incredibly thoughtful about where it is that they work and the companies that they join. What is that culture and what are those expectations? I will say I am really impressed by the younger generations. The folks that work for me, I encourage people to speak up and be very clear about what it is that they need and the balance that they need so that they can show up and be their best self at work as well as their best self at home. I was fortunate that I had people that believed in me within my career and really supported me to ensure that I was as balanced as I could possibly be. Probably all of the stress and pressure that I felt when I was younger, a lot of that I put on myself. And typically, if I did reach out and sort of talk with folks and say, hey, I need X, Y, and Z to accommodate this, or can I have some, flexibility here, whatever. I don't believe anybody ever said no to me. Now, whether or not that held me back, there's a part of me that would have to ponder that question a little bit. I don't believe so. I made partner. Maybe I would have made partner a couple years younger if I hadn't had kids, but my goodness, I could never, I don't regret that trade-off at all.
Mm-hmm.
So today it's a very different world. And I do believe that the younger generations are much more confident in asking for what it is that they need. And they're not as worried about, they're just not as worried about how people will think about them or evaluate them, which is great. I think that's fantastic because then you can have a really good, transparent conversation and make sure that you've, got the right functioning team. I know I keep saying that, but it's incredibly important. Otherwise, you're just going to burn people out and people miss deadlines and make mistakes and things like that. I would just encourage folks to be very clear about what is incredibly important to them. Your health has to be, and now I'm going to sound like I'm getting on a soapbox here, but you have to make time for your health and well-being. If you don't, sickness is going to force you into a completely different, framework or mindset or lifestyle that you didn't anticipate, which who knows what that can encompass. So make sure you're taking the steps early on. And if you're in an environment that doesn't encourage that or is actually harming your mental and physical well-being, you're in the wrong place. And it's okay to leave and go someplace else that will. And I don't believe the generations today have any concern in walking away from an environment that doesn't support them. So I'm happy to see that shift. But if there's anybody out there that is having a problem with that, really step back and take stock of what's important. And I can say as I'm, later in my career journey, looking back, the most important thing to me is my family and my health. And I feel very fortunate that I've had a career that has allowed me to grow and reach really interesting, challenging, fun positions. But I would never have done any of these things if it ever jeopardized my family or my health to the extreme. So, however, I wish I would have slept a lot more when I was younger.
Now you're making me wonder if I slept well at all last night. I'm thinking, no, I probably didn't. I'm going to need to take a little stock here.
Do you have an Aura ring? Do you actually monitor your sleep?
No, I don't. I have bunches of friends that do, and I know it is something that I should be thinking about. So if anything comes out of this podcast at all, it's one more person saying, Derek, get your shit together. Let's go. And I may just do it after this call. So pivoting off of a very important topic to one that is much less important, but one that my daughter would probably want me to ask, is T-Mobile recently acquired Mint. Have you met Ryan Reynolds?
No, I have not. I'm sorry to break her heart, but no, I haven't. And if I did, actually, I would ask him, can I please meet your wife? Because I think Blake Lively is just like an amazing human being. I would love to have a cup of coffee with her. But no, I have not met him. I've met the team and the CEO and the CFO and the broader team, but I have not met him. Only Mike
All
Seaver
right.
has had the opportunity to hug Ryan Reynolds.
All right, so I've peppered you with a bunch of questions. You have been gracious enough to answer them all incredibly well. Now we get to the point of this podcast where I let you ask me a question. I don't know what it is, and so I'll do my very best to answer as well as I can, but you now have the stage. Okay.
Okay. So first, before I ask you the question, I am going to say, all right, I'm going to follow up with you and see if you end up, purchasing a tracker to help you work through your sleep or monitor your sleep and your health and just see if that's something that you do. If you do, I think you will be shocked at what that data will tell you and how easy it is to just tweak little things here and there to feel better. If that is something that is really important to you, I don't know, because we haven't had a conversation truly around, a
Yes.
deep conversation around that, but would love to do that at some point with you. Okay, putting that aside, just letting you know, I'm going to annoy you and be bothering
Oh
you for
no.
that, but because that'll be fun. But no, so I'm curious. I mean, I love that you're doing these podcasts. I think it's a lot of fun and they're great to listen to. And I'm curious, what podcast is your favorite?
Okay, you're going to hate this answer, and I think everybody out there is going to hate it as well. I don't listen to podcasts.
What? What do
I
you
know.
mean?
I know, and that is the response that I get from everybody because everybody has a favorite podcast, and everybody says, "Derek, you should listen to this. Derek, you should listen to that. This is a great one." And I know they're all right. I am 100% certain of it, and I know I'm also missing out on
You
opportunities to
are.
be smarter and more engaged in lots of different things. And between that and the Aura Ring, I've got two things to do. For sure. And you'll be able to follow up with me on both of those, including a recommendation of your favorite podcast, which I will promise you I will listen to at least one, probably more.
So, if that's the case, maybe this will make it a little bit easier for you to, crack the podcast nut. And that is check out Smartless. It's hysterical. It's really funny. You will enjoy listening to them. It's Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes, Will Arnett, and they just BS for, an hour. And they'll bring in a surprise guest to every episode. One person brings in, talent and surprises the other two, and then they have this conversation. It's hysterical. It's a lot of fun. You'll enjoy listening to it. I mean, there's so many podcasts out there that are so educational and informative and such, and I have a whole list as long as my arm that I'm happy to share with you some other time. But Smartless is just super fun. I think you would love it. Knowing you, I think you'd have fun.
I have listened to a crime junkie one that my daughter put me onto a couple different
Sure.
times on a couple road trips, which are very fun to listen to. But I haven't, I haven't made them a part of my daily, weekly intake of information. But I will pivot off of your question and answer the what was my favorite podcast that I've
Yes.
done, even though you didn't ask that question specifically. The first thing I'll say is everyone's been great. Who is your favorite child? They're all my favorite. I don't love anybody more. However, I generally make reference to one that I did with Carrie Walsh. One because she was so gracious to do it without even a second of hesitation, and I didn't even know her that well. And
That's
I'm
fantastic.
I'm a volleyball dad, so
Yeah.
I kind of dig the whole volleyball scene. So that was a lot of fun to talk to her.
That's excellent. Well, you did a great
Yeah,
job too, right?
thanks.
It takes a lot to trust the person that's asking the questions and to share, your stories and such. So well done. Good job.
Well, and you've talked about your teams being so important as part of your success. I think if you pick people who are interesting and awesome and at least as good, if not better than you are, then you're probably going to end up with a pretty good output. So I've been very
Very good.
fortunate and look forward to this one hitting the podcast world. And on that note, I get to set you free. You've been awesome. I appreciate your time. Thank you for being an advocate of mine professionally as well, on this end, and saying good things about me over the years and being always so responsive. So you are absolutely, your career trajectory is an inspiration, and you are personally an inspiration as well. So really, really appreciate the time, Dara.
Thank you so much. And right back at you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the DeWinter Difference podcast. If you like this episode, head to dewintergroup.com/DeWinter-Difference to catch future episodes and share your thoughts, comments, or suggestions. And make sure to connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. This podcast is produced by the DeWinter Group, the leading recruiting firm in the Bay Area and beyond. We help top companies and people reach their fullest potential through world-class accounting, finance, and technology recruiting services.